You think this seat is yours? A woman who doesn't know her place shouldn't sit in this row. Officer Travis. Kincaid's words hissed through his teeth sharp as a razor, right in the middle of a juvenile hearing at the Charleston District Court. No one had time to react. Not the lawyers, not the judge, not the prosecutor. Only one person turned to look at him. Naomi Ellison, a black congresswoman and former civil rights attorney. Her hair was neatly tied back. She wore a light gray blazer and low-heeled shoes. No assistant, no name tag, no defense was spoken. Just a few minutes earlier, Naomi had entered the courtroom with a thin folder, unrelated to her constituency, unrelated to her career. It had all begun with a pre-dawn phone call from an old colleague. There's a 15-year-old boy named Elijah Moore being brought to court this morning. No lawyer, no family notification. No one outside the system knows. And Naomi came, not as a congresswoman, but as a sister who once cradled the body of her brother, Darius Ellison, who died in a holding cell 14 years ago for resisting administrative inspection. Naomi sat in the third row. Her eyes met Elijah's through the small glass window of the defendant's waiting room. The boy wore an oversized gray hoodie, his hands loosely cuffed, and his feet did not touch the floor. No attorney, no one beside him. Only pale yellow light and stacks of paperwork seemed to be devouring him bit by bit. Then Naomi's eyes locked on Travis Kincaid, the man standing beside the prosecutor, tall, a name badge on his chest, eyes laced with arrogance. When their eyes met, she knew. This wasn't a curious glance. It was the look of a man who knew he was being watched and wanted to prove who owned the room. Naomi said nothing. She sat straight, still unflinching, and that was what Travis Kincaid couldn't stand. No warning, no reason, no command. He marched toward her. Each step landed like nails driven into the old wooden floor. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. Smack. The slap landed squarely across Naomi's cheek. It's not a symbolic insult, a real blow. The sound of skin hitting skin cracked across the courtroom like a whip against an ancient stone. Naomi didn't fall. They didn't clutch her cheek. I didn't shed a tear. She stood slowly. Her eyes never left the man who had struck her, and in that gaze the entire courtroom felt as if it had been buried alive. The judge froze. The clerk stopped typing. The prosecutor turned pale. No one spoke. No one intervened. No one protected her. But Naomi didn't need saving. She had already struck back without lifting a finger. Her silence was her first act of defiance. That slap wasn't just aimed at her. It was a blow at everyone who had ever been taught. If you want to survive, stay silent. And the way she stood tall, her eyes steady, her cheek flushed, but her spirit unshaken, fractured a system that had believed it had buried every trace. Travis Kincaid withdrew his hand. But he was the one trembling now, because in Naomi's eyes at that moment, there was no rage. Only one thing, and it terrified him more than anything else. Being seen through. Naomi didn't move. She stood like a bronze statue in a room thick with the scent of old paper and complicity. Her eyes never left Travis Kincaid, the man who had just slapped her in front of the entire courtroom, with no one lifting a finger in protest. And what about Elijah Moore? The boy still sat behind the glass window, his feet not touching the floor, his cuffed hands suspended midair, a living symbol of helplessness. Naomi glanced at the boy once more, and in that look, she saw something far more terrifying than the slap itself. Not fear, but familiarity. Elijah wasn't panicked. He wasn't resisting, as if this wasn't the first time he had been treated this way, as if injustice had become a default setting in his life. Naomi turned to the prosecutor's table. Empty. No defense attorney, No guardian. No one is standing for the 15-year-old boy on trial, without anyone knowing why. She walked over to the spectator bench. I picked up a copy of the docket left behind by an assistant case title, The State versus Elijah Moore Detention Reason, Non-Compliant Behavior at Scene. There is no attached video, no testimony, no guardian's report, just one sterile line. Subject displayed inappropriate attitude. Further evaluation required. Naomi looked up at Elijah. He said nothing, but his eyes seemed to ask, "How am I supposed to resist something I don't even understand? I'm being accused of." She turned toward the court clerk, an older woman whose eyes flickered as if she wanted to shrink out of her body. Naomi asked, her voice soft but steely, "Has the defendant been given access to a lawyer or a legal guardian?" No one answered. No one dared. From across the room, Elijah gently touched his wrist where the cuff had left a red imprint. Not to resist, but as if checking whether he could still feel anything at all. And in that moment, Naomi knew. This boy didn't need to be rescued like a victim. He needed to be pulled back from the abyss of erasure, where the system had thrown him like a discarded invalid name. Travis Kincaid still stood near the prosecutor's table, his hand clenched at his belt. He was flustered, not because he feared a lawsuit, but because Naomi hadn't reacted the way he expected. She didn't yell. She didn't storm out. She didn't call security. She just stood there like an unspoken verdict, and everyone feared it. He muttered low but audible, "You're blowing this up over some no-name kid. He doesn't even have anyone here for him." Naomi replied, no need to raise her voice. "He has a name, and that name doesn't belong to you. To erase." Travis's hand clenched tighter. Naomi's words, though whispered like a breath, landed like a gavel on his forehead. In a shadowed corner of the courtroom, a young court reporter, Miles DuPont, watched everything through his laptop lens. He didn't speak, didn't move, but his eyes recorded every second. He knew, from the moment Naomi stood up after that slap, something inside this system had begun to shift. There was no ticking clock, no cars outside the window, only the sound of rustling paper as Naomi opened an old case file, the kind that should never appear on the table of justice. Name on the file: Malcolm Reyes, age 17, date of death, May 18, 2005. Note: fatal injury during physical restraint. In the course of the investigation, Naomi didn't need to read further. She had memorized every word since she was 15, the year she witnessed her brother being subdued by police for moving too slowly through a monitored neighborhood. Malcolm didn't get the chance to scream. I didn't get to apologize, because what was there to apologize for? There was only a streak of blood on the collar of his white school uniform. A high schooler who once dreamed of attending Fisk University on a math scholarship. Malcolm's death didn't stir the media. There was no internal investigation. No official lost their job. Only one line remained: no misconduct found in the course of intervention. Naomi then was too young to sue anyone, too poor to hire a lawyer, too alone to be believed. But at the funeral, standing before the sealed coffin, because Malcolm's face was no longer recognizable, she made a vow: I won't let the system erase another name, even if it's not my brother's. And now, Elijah Moore, the boy with hollow eyes in the courtroom, was Malcolm reborn in a different body, carrying the same tragedy. No legal representation. No one asked if he was in pain. Not a single glance that called his name with recognition. Naomi picked up an old photo. Malcolm smiling in a white shirt, holding a book twice his size. She placed the photo on the table. Next to it is a copy of Elijah's file. His name, Elijah Moore, was misspelled 3 times. His birth date didn't match school records. Travis Kincaid himself wrote the non-compliant behavior entry. Everything was clear. They didn't need evidence. They just needed a reason. And if they didn't have one, they'd make it up. Naomi pressed the record button. Her voice rang out low, but resolute. I, Naomi Reyes, am submitting a formal notice to the South Carolina State Office of Judicial Oversight. I have reason to believe a minor, Elijah Moore, is being unlawfully detained. I request immediate review of his arrest conditions, medical status, and access to legal counsel. If this request is not addressed within 24 hours, I will escalate the case to federal authorities. No reply. None needed. She wasn't waiting for the system to act. She would force the system to chase the truth. On the white wall of the room, Naomi pinned 2 files side by side. Under each name she wrote in red marker, Malcolm, forgotten Elijah, still has a chance. She didn't need press. It didn't need banners. Just the strength to stand alone as she had promised 20 years ago. Naomi Reyes stepped into the Charleston Police Department like a shadow. No gleaming badge, no secretary rushing to greet her. Only a few glances that flickered and then turned away, as if her silence alone was a threat. She placed the urgent investigation request at the front desk. I need access to Elijah Moore's detention records, including arrest time, notification of rights guardian contact logs, and the body cam footage. The receptionist, a middle-aged man with glasses, didn't ask questions. He nodded and pressed the internal phone line. 2 minutes later, a flat voice came from inside. The data is currently undergoing encryption. Access is delayed due to a synchronization error. Naomi raised an eyebrow slightly. She'd heard those words before. Encryption system errors, sync delays. All were bureaucratic language for one thing: cover-up. She pulled out her laptop and opened a secure portal through the Civil Rights Attorney Network. Within 10 minutes, she accessed several real-time backup logs. One line made her blood run cold. Time of Elijah Moore's arrest: 17. Time logged into the detention center: 19:53. Naomi inhaled slowly. She double-checked. The boy was processed into the system 24 minutes before he was arrested. There were only 2 possibilities. 1. The arrest report was backdated to legalize it retroactively. 2. Or someone had altered the records in the system. Naomi recalled something a former forensic data analyst colleague once told her. In the detention record system, not all errors are accidents. Some are deliberate, and only insiders know how to record an event. That never happened. She looked up. The receptionist had vanished. The room now stood empty, filled only by the quiet hum of a printer in the far corner. On the wall was a top officers of the quarter board. Top of the list: Lieutenant Travis Kincaid, 98% incident resolution rate. Without media attention. Naomi stepped closer. Below, Kincaid's photo was a small quote: I work in silence because justice doesn't need noise. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. Then I turned on slow-motion camera mode, panning across the records. Archive room. Everything was too clean. No document still bore fresh ink. No audio file was labeled urgent. Only a sterility that reeked of manipulation. Naomi left the room, but inside she knew. This wasn't a coincidence. This was design. A system built to erase traces faster than a cry for help. Back in her car, she opened her laptop and ran an advanced synchronization diagnostic. A script name appeared. Script name: Clean Sync, Routine, 47. Auto Runtime, 03:00 a.m. Daily Function. Overwrite and standardized data timestamps. Stores only the final version. No intermediate log backups. Naomi bit her lip. They're not just erasing the truth. They programmed it, so the truth never existed. She stared at the blinking screen. Her heartbeat slowed, then pounded like a warning bell. For the first time in years, Naomi realized she wasn't just up against a corrupt officer. She was facing a system that knew how to be wrong ideally. Inside courtroom 6, the air was thick. People called it the internal chamber, a place where cases had no press, no jury, and nothing memorable. Naomi sat quietly in the third row, having submitted a petition to attend Elijah Moore's preliminary hearing as an observer. No one objected. No one welcomed her either. She was just a shadow. Until she wasn't Elijah. The 15-year-old boy wearing a faded hoodie was brought in by a tall officer. His wrists were lightly cuffed, and one side of his face was swollen and bruised. A red mark extended from his temple down to his cheekbone. Naomi clenched her fists, eyes locked on the injury. No report had mentioned Elijah being assaulted. To the right, Lieutenant Travis Kincaid, the same man from this morning's honors board, stood by the prosecutor, one hand resting casually on his belt, eyes flicking toward Naomi. She stared back, and in that look, no words, no gestures. There was only a collision of two wills. One is used to treating the courtroom like private property, the other armed with a silence sharp as a scalpel. When the judge entered and read the opening remarks, Travis didn't wait. He walked straight up to Naomi. No warning. No words. The slap cracked like a whip on a cold stone. The room froze. Naomi's face turned to the side, but she didn't fall. She raised her head, eyes reddened, but dry. No one spoke. No one rushed over. The judge remained silent. The prosecutor stared at the floor. The court clerk dropped her pen. But Naomi didn't need anyone. She slowly turned her head back and looked Kincaid in the eye, not trembling, not flinching. And she said softly, just loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Not this time." 2 words, not dramatic, not unusual. But they struck like the first ruling of a hearing that had never officially begun. Kincaid faltered. His hand was still flushed red, but he was trembling. "Not Naomi. You think a slap will silence me?" Naomi continued, her voice steady as ever. "You're wrong. From now on, I won't have to speak. The system will speak for itself." Behind her, someone's phone buzzed quietly. A message from a friend. The clip is spreading. Naomi Reyes slapped in open court, over 10,000 shares in 15 minutes. The footage showed only one thing. Naomi standing upright, face bruised, eyes locked forward, as if exposing a system that slapped justice with its hand. A war had officially begun. Not with lawsuits, not with slogans, but with a silence that refused to submit. Naomi didn't wait for the hearing to end. She turned toward the door, but didn't leave. She stood in the hallway directly facing the wall, bearing the seal, Charleston County Justice Center, and for the first time, she looked at that emblem and saw no justice. Only the collapse that was now drawing near. That afternoon, Naomi returned to her small rented room on Murray Hill Street. No bodyguards, no reporters, just a water jug, a laptop, and dozens of hastily folded case files. The scattered traces of an unnamed war. When she opened her email, she found an anonymous message. No subject line, no introduction. Just an attached audio file with a short caption. "This is where all the lies begin." She clicked play, static buzz, then a man's deep voice, clear but cautious. "The kids don't need a lawyer. I already prepared a standard statement form. Just have the kid sign." Another voice snickered, like the little punk could read that. "He's 15 but still can't spell his name." The first voice again. "Exactly. Use template 3. Non-combative, but still enough reason to detain." Naomi froze. Template 3. That phrase had echoed across dozens of transcripts she'd reviewed, strange uniform reports, all written in the same sterile tone. Individual displays non-cooperative behavior, though not threatening. Continued detainment for public order. She reopened Elijah Moore's file. The The short, emotionless report that read like a machine had printed it. Time of arrest: 8:12 p.m. Location: South Charleston Convenience Store. Cause: loitering behavior. Unclear intent. Response: non-combative, but still marked non-cooperative. Additional notes: no legal support needed. Signature: verified by an individual. Naomi looked at the signature line. It didn't match any handwriting from Elijah that she'd seen during her interview with his mother. The signature had been forged. She opened 4 more case files. All used the same phrasing. No officer's name is listed. No guardian confirmation. All stamped internal handling. A perfect model to hide the truth. A system designed to look legal, while twisting justice until it no longer resembled itself. Naomi unlocked her phone and messaged Arden Liu, a law student who'd helped her decode Charleston's internal administrative protocols. I need you to check for the term Template 3, especially in cases without legal representation. A minute later, Arden replied, Holy hell, that template exists, and it's assigned to black minors. Naomi typed back, It's not just a template. It's the key to an entire silent enforcement pipeline. She opened her recorder. Her voice rang low but steady. This audio file isn't just evidence. It's a map leading to a system built to pretend justice is happening, while the victims don't even know they've been erased from the system. At that moment, a new message came in from an unknown number. If you release that recording, you won't just be in trouble. We have ways of making things disappear. Naomi didn't reply. She just wrote one more line in her notebook. The slap didn't stop me. This recording will unmask the entire system. Naomi stepped into the basement of the Charleston PD headquarters, carrying a borrowed access card temporarily borrowed from someone within the system. Desmond Klein, a data tech, had once been her student in an ethics and criminal justice class. He didn't say much, just whispered as he handed her the card. I don't want to disappear, but I also don't want to keep helping them erase those kids' names. The digital records here didn't resemble those of a typical office. No paper, no physical folders, labeled by year. Only strings of codes and tagged entries, like CT Flex Review, Internal Minor Template 3, NVH. Human names. Elijah Troy, Kendra, had all been replaced with sterile IDs, MN14782, YP22314. Naomi opened a hidden folder requiring Level 3 authentication. She typed the password, not yet till 23, a phrase she had kept close to her heart ever since being slapped in the courtroom. The screen blinked to life. Emergency override access. Logged in as Admin G3. Admin G3. The name had appeared in report footnotes, a shadow no one dared question. It wasn't a person. It was total authority. The power to edit, delete, grant, access, create templates, and modify timestamps and categories. Naomi began to tremble, not from fear, but because she knew she had just found the central lock of the entire machine. Just then, footsteps echoed from the dark hallway. A man stood in the doorway, his shadow stretching beneath the fluorescent lights. You shouldn't be here, he said. His voice was low, not threatening but full of warning. You're tampering with something designed never to be discovered. As he approached, Naomi recognized him. Harold Lynn, the chief technical supervisor for Charleston PD, had managed all internal data flows for over 12 years. She didn't flinch. You authorized more than 40 reports where intake timestamps were altered, Naomi said. You know, Template 3 isn't just a form. It's a tool for erasure of identity. Harold looked at her, then exhaled a deep, heavy breath, like dragging an entire career into an abyss. You ever wonder why the system never records who gives the final order? He asked. Because the final person doesn't need to order anything. They need a tool. And I I was the one holding it. Naomi tapped her phone, playing the recording she had retrieved days earlier. Harold's voice, during a closed-door meeting 2 years ago. If no one asks, don't upload it to the central system. Tag it as internal processing. Simple as that. Disappear without switching off the lights. Harold said nothing. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She only said one line. Systems aren't born from cruelty. They're born from people who stay silent when cruelty passes them. A bead of sweat slid down Harold's temple. He slumped into the chair, trembling. You don't understand, he whispered. There were cases I wanted to preserve. Once I let one file stay. The next morning, my office was torn apart. No one said a word. But I understood. This isn't a system. It's a ritual of erasing names through digitized power. Naomi didn't need a confession. She just needed a path into admin G3, and Harold chose not to lock the door for the first time in his life. Naomi sat across from Arden Liu, the young data analyst, who had once interned at the Department of Justice, but left when he realized the system was far too silent. Arden had just finished decrypting the root directory from admin G3 on his tablet. Not 27 files, but 46. 46 internally processed records. No names, no public files, only ID numbers and vague justifications like behavior inconsistent with school environment, displayed non-compliance when asked to remain for questioning. Communication caused concern for staff. These phrases had once served as administrative death sentences for the existence of an entire generation of young black youth. Naomi laid her hand across each ID, reading the names aloud. Troy Bennett, Kendra Moss, Jamira Fields, Isaiah Wells, Micah Bell, Jasper Lowe, Ayanna King. Each name spoken aloud wasn't just an identification. It was a memory, restored, a presence reclaimed from a system that had once labeled it an error to be deleted. Arden spoke softly. Do you see it? None of them committed crimes, and yet every record reads as if they were nearly criminals. Naomi nodded. That's the formula of silent erasure. You don't need charges, just vague enough language to make everyone question the victim. That evening, they held a quiet meeting in the second-floor reading room of a bookstore, once used as a free tutoring space for students suspended without cause. Naomi didn't send invitations. She hand-delivered 7 letters to the mailboxes of the first 7 names on the list. And by exactly 8 p.m., one by one they arrived. Troy is now a maintenance worker, thin, but no longer avoiding eye contact. Kendra had crutches from an injury labeled a traffic incident 3 weeks prior. Isaiah, quiet and reserved, was once documented as disrupting public order by asking why he was being searched. Jamira, 14, with tight cornrows and an unflinching stare, had once been pulled off her own porch for observing a tactical entry. Naomi didn't start with a speech. She opened a whiteboard and wrote 4 words. What is your name? The first minute was silence. Then Jamira raised her hand. I want to speak, not to accuse, but to affirm that I existed. One by one, they stepped forward and wrote their names alongside the reason the system had used to erase them. Troy Bennett failed to exit the convenience store promptly. Kendra Moss loitered without purpose near school fencing. Isaiah Wells remained silent when questioned. Delayed response. Jamira Fields stood and watched. The room fell completely still when all 4 names were written on the board. No spotlight, no cameras. It's just a presence too solid to be erased again. Naomi turned to Arden. I don't need them to testify in court. I need them to exist again openly before the system gets another chance to bury them. She posted a photo of the whiteboard to social media. No hashtags, no caption, just a single sentence. This is how justice begins, not with accusation, but by refusing to let anyone be forgotten. The post didn't go viral instantly, but real people started to show up. Anonymous messages, A mother sent a photo of her son's school record was erased after a single instance of non-compliance with verbal directive. A retired officer mailed in a letter I once signed off on a blank report. I don't know whose future I destroyed, but I'm ready to confess. Naomi entered the hearing room, not with a high-powered legal team, but with 7 individuals once labeled as internally processed. They didn't speak. They sat holding copies of the files the system had once tried to erase. At the head of the room sat the Charleston Judicial Oversight Council, with an unexpected figure presiding. Chief Inspector Nathaniel Griggs. Once the right-hand man of Police Chief Granger, Naomi wasn't surprised. She knew that when a system is exposed to light, it will try to protect itself with polite language and vague blame-shifting tactics. Griggs began. Ms. Naomi Sloan, you are accusing a system sustained by public trust and federal funding for nearly 20 years. So tell us, what is your concrete evidence besides undocumented claims and emotionally charged testimony? Naomi rose quietly, opened her folder of documents, and pulled them out one by one. Each sheet is a real internal record, bearing leaked authorization signatures. Excerpt from a chat between the Rapid Response Unit commander and Precinct 9 officers. Case number A39, underage. Hold quiet. Mark as non-compliant. Let legal intake take care of it. An internal memo from the legal division regarding soft erasing student records after unwanted incidents. Sample behavior report template reused since 2016 with the same font and wording, but only the victim's name changed. Griggs pressed, but even if misconduct occurred, these are isolated incidents. We can't indict a framework based on a few bad cases. Naomi didn't respond immediately. She walked to the digital board and projected a timeline. 27 erased records in 6 years. 24 of them occurred just before major urban redevelopment projects. 18 tied to areas later bought out at discount prices by investor James Linderman. Naomi looked Griggs square in the eye. Individual mistakes don't repeat. 27 times across 18 children in 6 districts, using the same methods of record deletion linked to the same financial web. That's not an error. That's architecture. From the back, Troy Bennett stood. He held a copy of his old report, which showed he'd been detained for 16 hours without charge. I stayed silent for 5 years. Not because I was weak, but because I thought I was alone. Now I know. I was part of a system programmed to forget us. Jamira Fields stood up too. She didn't chant. She just said, I'm not a data point. I'm the memory of what you tried to bury, and I still remember. The hearing didn't end with applause. It ended in a quiet unease behind the eyes of those who had once believed the system was blameless. Griggs didn't refute. He gave a slow nod, the kind that hinted at the realization. What we once called order is now unraveling from within. That night, Naomi received an unmarked USB drive in an unmarked envelope. There is no message, just a single file. Its contents. The list isn't over. They're still quietly tagging the next child. From someone who once stood guard over what they called stability. Naomi descended the old concrete stairwell, the flashlight from her phone casting a dim glow. Beneath the 3rd floor, a rusted iron door creaked open from the inside. Inside the room, there was only one man. A man in a faded button-down shirt with salt and pepper hair sat quietly among stacks of old files, tape recorders, and a wall-sized map of Charleston's internal data infrastructure. My name is Julian Wakefield, he said. I was the city's chief of special data administration from 2008 to 2019. I mapped out the system for every record you just uncovered. Naomi didn't blink. Julian continued. We didn't need to delete things by hand. We had to write a layered algorithm flag, something as risk managed, and let the system automatically downgrade the file's processing priority. When data isn't prioritized, it gets forgotten legally. Julian handed Naomi a silver-wrapped hard drive, sealed with the city's Office of Data Protection stamp. There are 94 names on this drive. 27 are the ones you've already found. The remaining 67 were never officially recorded because their files were never created. Naomi gripped the drive tightly. "Why are you giving this to me?" Julian looked her in the eye. "Because one of those names is my son, and I'm the one who unknowingly flipped the switch that erased him from the system." Inside the hard drive, a script named Shadowbatch 47, a command used to flag cases for internal intervention based on behavior without a court order. Fragmented files, each person broken into scattered data segments, never enough to form a valid case or record. Internal notes between senior officials. Don't open a case file, just tag it under behavioral monitoring. No one sues what was never documented. Naomi opened an email from the Federal Office of Justice, subject Systemic Data Pattern Analysis. 89% match with AI-driven discrimination model, identified in 2017. Newark report. She froze. This wasn't just a broken system. It was a machine learning mechanism trained and now operating to erase Black individuals from neighborhoods the city intended to redevelop. That afternoon, Naomi posted a 12-second audio clip to social media. Julian Wakefield's voice. "I didn't think I was creating something evil. I thought I was optimizing a system, until optimization meant erasing the vulnerable." The video reached 4 million views in 18 hours. Outside the city data center, more than 400 residents gathered, demanding access to the records that never existed. A small child held a handwritten sign. "If I don't have a file, how do you prove I exist?" Naomi understood. This was no longer just about Micah Kendra or Troy. This was a war against technology, a system trained to bury the truth. Inside an ice-cold server room on the 6th floor of the Charleston Data Administration Center, Naomi stared at a screen displaying more than 12,000 data points, categorized by color. Green for stable orange, for monitor, red for high risk. All of them were high school students. "What is this?" Naomi asked the cybersecurity expert, accompanying her a man named Ellis Grant. He didn't answer immediately. He typed a command open delta filter. YAML line appeared, priority index equals attendance # variance. 1-3 plus disciplinary notes. 2 plus home address, risk. 1-5 plus tone analysis score. Naomi froze. They're evaluating the risk of juvenile crime by adding behavior points, absence frequency, neighborhood risk level, and voice tone analysis. Ellis nodded. The data was collected from patrol car microphones and school hallway cameras. No warrant needed. It's bundled under the school safety analysis package. Micah Bell's name had been marked red within that system for the past 8 months. Not because he did anything wrong, but because AI flagged his voice as having resistance tendencies. Naomi scrolled further. 58% of the high-risk list were Black students. 71% lived in neighborhoods targeted for real estate redevelopment. 0% had any criminal record. She accessed the training samples directory where the original training data was stored. Inside it, one file stood out: audio flag examples from 2015. Naomi played a clip. A child's voice said, "I don't want to go home because there's no electricity at home." System note, off rhythm tone. Add 0.3 to the emotional reactivity score. Flagged, expand surveillance category. Naomi looked directly into the security camera that was recording this entire session. They don't need prisons. They only need one algorithm that knows when your child will be seen as a threat. That night, Naomi hosted a special live stream lasting only 11 minutes. There were no victim names, no slogans. Just one thing. The Delta filter algorithm, line by line, is displayed on the screen. This is how they rate your children without your knowledge. This determines whether they'll be subject to active monitoring or not. And no one ever told you. The community erupted. Parents held emergency meetings. The Charleston Teachers Association demanded a 48-hour suspension of all student tracking systems. A group of AI ethics experts published a 42-page report titled Delta Filter, a Racially Engineered Data System, Intentional, Structural, and Discriminatory. Naomi met a girl named Zora Hill, 13 years old, who had been labeled high reactivity simply for asking a question during a PTA meeting about random backpack searches. Her mother, a night shift nurse, had never been informed her daughter was on the surveillance list. Zora asked Naomi, "What did I do wrong?" Naomi replied, "You asked a question, and the system was programmed to fear children who ask." At the end of this chapter, Naomi filed an emergency petition with the Federal Civil Rights Commission, demanding 1, immediate suspension of the Delta filter program. 2, all students. Public disclosure is secretly classified. 3, ban behavior-based predictive models from being used without informed parental consent. In the final quote attached to her petition, she wrote, "No child is born as a data risk, but the system was taught to see it in every smile, every glance, every question." On a Wednesday morning in the North Side neighborhood, Naomi Sloan stood at the front steps of an old house, peeling walls a yard strewn with dry leaves. It's not a campaign office. It's not a legal center. A wooden sign hung at the door read, "The Sloan Classroom, where we begin again, with the right to know." Inside there were no swivel chairs, no projectors, only a whiteboard, wooden benches, a few stacks of printed paper, and a jug of filtered water on a stool. The first class had 5 people. A 15-year-old girl was labeled a high-risk student, simply for asking why too often in class. A father who had been denied access to his son's records after an unwarranted arrest. A former city librarian who quietly preserved copies of internal reports no one dared to publish. A student who had been erased from administrative logs for wearing a black hoodie while walking at 8 p.m. A teacher was suspended for blowing the whistle on random student searches without legal basis. Naomi didn't start with a lecture. She placed a sheet of paper in front of each person with one question. When was the last time you were forced to stay silent? No one answered immediately, but no one left. 30 minutes later, they began to write, with pens, by hand. No typing, no editing. Within 3 months, the class grew to over 40 participants. Not all had been touched directly by the system, but they all had one thing in common. At some point, they believed silence was the only way to survive. Naomi began collecting the handwritten testimonies and placed them in a wooden box labeled 27 Stories. We reclaimed stories once erased are now rewritten by those who lived them. They didn't need to be on television. They didn't need journalists. They only needed to be called by their real names to tell their truths and to be fully heard. One winter day, Naomi received a small, nameless package. Inside was a handwritten note. "I was once the engineer behind Delta Filter. I used to believe I was making the city safer, but when you read the algorithm aloud, I realized I wasn't writing code. I was scripting the fear my child would one day face. No one ever taught me how to start over, but because of you, I now know. The first step is to stop being silent." Signed, a former engineer, once known only as Invisible. No one called Naomi a justice warrior at a local community gathering. They called her the keeper of the light, because what she did wasn't just to shine a spotlight on the guilty. It was to keep the light on for those who once believed they weren't worthy of being seen. At the end of this chapter, Naomi returns to the place where it all began. Courtroom 4, Charleston. No more police. No more Micah Bell in handcuffs. Just a group of students attending a mock trial organized by Naomi herself. One young girl stood up, voice trembling. "If the law is wrong, are we allowed to speak up?" Naomi smiled, nodded. "Not only are you allowed, you have to." So next time, no one will ever need to ask that question again. The final line she wrote on the whiteboard that day: "No system is forever if we remember how to ask the right questions."